Welcome, ethereal bartenders, to Geek Salad's Retro Movie Reviews from the Geek Salad Podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And tonight we are here to kick off October. It is Halloween season. And last year we talked about horror movies from the 70s. This year we're talking about horror movies from the 80s. And we're starting tonight with 1980 Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Don't you mean The Shine?
Quiet! Do you want to get sued?
Oh, sorry.
We planned that one.
Can you tell?
So, yeah, we decided to start, and this was an interesting thing. So, for the last 2 months, Mike and I have going back and forth between what movies we wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on the early part of the decade. And Mike pointed out to me that the two movies that are on my picks are more auteur-driven horror movies, whereas Mike's will be closer to what you think a horror movie is in the 1980s.
Yeah, he's more of the auteur 70s throwback feel of the early 80s. Yeah. I'm more of the late 80s, early 90s kind of popcorn, like cheap knockoff.
Yeah, you're more on the slasher end of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about The Shining. Now, was this the first time you've seen it?
It was actually.
It was okay.
I've seen a lot of like bits and pieces here then, but I've never watched the entire movie all the way through.
Okay. I watched it. So I saw this like on television a long time ago.
I'm sure.
I saw it once on television with a terrible TV edit. Like there's that scene where Jack is beginning to crack up. He goes in, beginning to. And he goes into that bathroom, and the woman comes out like fully naked and walks towards him.
Yeah.
The TV edit actually had like this big blur. It's like they didn't even bother to do a close up, shoulders up, close up, or anything like that. It was just a blur.
Yeah, that scene does not really translate to made for TV all that well.
No, it doesn't. Most of the images in this movie don't.
No.
Which is really interesting because this movie is 2.5 hours long.
Yeah. This is actually the second Stanley Kubrick movie I've ever seen.
What was the first?
2001.
Okay. All right. Actually, if I'm honest, I might have actually seen all of Stanley Kubrick's movies. And I'm not, and that's the thing, I'm not the biggest fan. They tell me I want to get sued. I'm not the biggest Kubrick fan because I feel like Kubrick puts an imprint in all of his movies that it is, and by all of his movies, I mean everything from 2001, maybe even Dr. Strangelove on. I mean, I feel like Dr. Strangelove is more of a mainstream movie that had a lot of the mentality of like a far out anti-war hippie movie in the 60s. But when you get to something like 2001, you are now experimenting in color, experimenting in special effects. By the way, the only Oscar Kubrick ever won was as visual effects for 2001. That is the only Oscar ever.
He was nominated for 2 awards for this one. Oh, well, The Shining was nominated for 2 awards.
Right, but neither of them were anything huge.
No, it was the very first Razzies. And Shelley Duvall was nominated for Worst Actress, and Stanley Kubrick was nominated for Worst Director.
Okay. We're going to talk about Shelley Duvall in just a little bit, because I have thoughts.
As do
there are certain times when this movie is really well directed. And then there are other times when this movie feels like the director cannot get out of his own way.
If I'm honest, I feel that like from 2001 and this one, neither one makes me think that I like Stanley Kubrick very much at all.
Right.
He is a fantastic visual director. His visual style is striking. But are they good movies? No, they are not.
Right.
I'm sorry for everyone that loves The Shining. It's not a good movie.
You know what's funny too? It really struck me watching this movie on. You and I both streamed this on Max.
Yeah.
So you and I both got like the 4K conversion of this movie. Whereas people seeing this in 1980 saw like a 75 millimeter cut of this movie. I can't imagine how much more vivid the colors are for us now, watching essentially what is a cleaned up version of the movie versus like going to the theater in 1980 when they still allowed people to smoke in the theater.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just like every film just looked like somebody ran it through like a dirty carpet before they they did that. But to your point, the visuals of this movie are great. And that is, I mean, go back. If you want to watch a really good looking Kubrick movie that most people haven't seen, check out Barry Lyndon.
Oh yeah, that's the one where
Barry Lyndon, sorry.
Every like frame is like a painting reference or something.
Pretty much. It is a great looking movie. It is long and it is a slog to get through, but it looks good.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, this movie is gorgeous. Like the scenes of like Danny just driving around with the steady cam behind him.
What do we got?
The rugs. I mean, because this, well, the exterior was kind of taken from inspiration from the Stanley Hotel in Colorado.
Yeah.
All the interiors, pretty much all of this movie was shot on set in Elstree Studios.
Yeah.
So all the art styles, all the walls, all the carpets, they were all specifically picked by Kubrick, and kudos. It makes it look very memorable.
It not only does it make it look memorable, it also feels claustrophobic. It also makes it feel dizzying. The design of the carpet and the wallpaper is dizzying, which is great because it really disorients you as the viewer. And again, we're talking about the visual style of Kubrick here. Overall, it's been almost 40 years since I've read The Shining. I know Stephen King hates this movie.
Yeah,
he hates this in a way that like Roald Dahl hated Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Although I can understand Stephen King a little bit more because he for him. The Shining, the book of The Shining was way more kind of almost autobiographical for him.
Yeah.
And genuinely, this movie, it should not have been called The Shining because Danny's power has absolutely no effect on the movie whatsoever.
It really doesn't.
I mean, if you like go like my first experience, like I've never read the book, but I've seen the 3-part miniseries was starring Steven Weber, which I really enjoy. I know you don't care for it much, but I really enjoy it. And it shows you, The Shining is like, that is like a central pivotal plot point in this one. And in this one, they might have just left it off.
Creepy kid does creepy things. That's what it amounted to.
The only reason The Shining has any effect in this one is to get Halloran back to the hotel with the second snow cat.
Yeah, that is exactly it. And I was thinking about that too. All right, so folks, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this movie. So when Halloran dies immediately after walking into the hotel, I'm like, oh, Mike's going to have issues with this. But I'm glad you brought it up, Mike, that the entire reason why Halloran was there was to get that second cat.
Yeah, that is
the hotel. That was it.
And you could have easily, like, if he was going to like be changing pieces of this movie of the book willy-nilly, you could have easily just had like a second one stashed in the back garage or whatever. I don't know. You did not need The Shining.
Well, because Halloran lives in the book.
Yeah, he gets injured, but he still lives.
Right, and Jack is possessed by this, like the ghost, the creature of the hotel. It tries to get Danny, but Danny is too strong. Jack is weak.
And the reason why the ghosts are able to start manifesting and possessing Jack is because they're kind of leeching power off of Danny's shining.
Yeah.
And there really aren't even any ghosts in this movie. I think they're all just figments of Jack's head.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing in the lounge, in the ballroom. You know, you've got those ghosts there.
In fact,
you've got
even
the woman in the bathtub. You got the twins. The
twins
girls
are the only images that, other than like the final moment where Wendy's walking through the hotel, the twins are the only ghosts that appear to anyone besides Jack.
Right.
And even like when Jack's stuck in the pantry, you never see Grady. You only hear his voice.
Yeah.
And that voice is all in Jack's head. The
right.
only kind of weird possible supernatural is the fact that he was able to get out of the pantry.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could easily be written away.
So what struck me about this movie was just the utter disregard for character work at all in this movie. You and I were having a conversation about this last night, and you and I were having to come up with our own ideas for what might be going on, because this movie sure as hell doesn't tell us any of that.
No.
You've got, we know that Jack is a recovering alcoholic, and he was a teacher. Now he's a writer. That's all we know about him. We don't know if there was any other trauma or anything. And I mentioned to you yesterday this passionless relationship that he and Wendy have.
Yeah.
Definitely, she's terrified of him. This isn't, the whole thing about her being so lackadaisical about Danny when she's talking to the social worker about, Danny's arm and Jack, dislocating his arm, was that, she's terrified of him because it's probably happened to her too. Yeah. And she just needs to maintain the status quo at all times. Yeah. This is classic Survivor, it's just classic abuse behavior.
Yeah. And I read some behind the scenes stuff where I guess Stephen King was like trying to convince Kubrick, go with just someone that looks like an everyday man, like just a normal person, because like, I'm sorry, but when Jack Nicholson shows up at the Overlook Hotel and they're interviewing him, like they've got to realize this guy is clearly a psychopath, and there's going to be dead bodies before we come back in May, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You mean the guy with the expressive forehead and eyebrows that keeps talking like this the entire time?
Hi, I'm totally not going to kill people. Don't worry about it. I'm so glad during the interview they tell him that his predecessor 10 years ago decided to slaughter his family and then blow his brains out.
Yeah.
Because when I start a new job, that's something I want to know. Did one of my predecessors try to commit murder-suicide?
Hey, in all fairness, that was 10 years ago. Now, we don't know what happened to any of the other caretakers since, because obviously they've had caretakers in that interim, right?
Yeah, and they had to have had at least 9 or 10 more.
They would have. Yeah. They would have absolutely had to have had at least, 9 or 10 more. Otherwise, they didn't have anybody, and there's no point in having a caretaker.
Yeah.
During the winter months. Because it's not like he didn't do a lot of anything.
Yeah, the only person you see doing anything with like the boiler was Wendy.
Yeah. And she was on the radio talking to the Stadies. It made no sense.
So, did they hire Jack or did they hire Wendy? Because she seems to be doing his work.
She's doing all the work. Yeah, well, again, she's terrified of him.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is that you talk about like Stephen King wanting an everyman and having Jack Nicholson coming in, playing a character named Jack. By the way, Danny's actor, the actor who played Danny was Danny Lloyd. So the only person who got a character name besides Scatman Crothers, because even though it'd be awesome to have a character named Scatman, is Shelley Duvall as Wendy.
Yeah.
I think, I told you I was going to get back to this.
Yeah.
I think that Shelley Duvall, that the whole thing with the Razzies was horse shit.
They did
the best actor in this entire movie.
They actually, the Razzies actually apologized to her in 2022 after all the news about what happened, what Kubrick did to her came out.
Yeah, because Kubrick was psychologically torturing her too. I mean, my God, that poor woman. And again, because we saw how Shelley Duvall lived the rest of her life is really sad, because she was a phenomenal actress. This whole thing, we talked about her a couple of weeks ago when we talked about Time Bandits. She is putting in the best performance in the entire movie. Part of it might just be because, again, she's terrified of Stanley Kubrick, but also she is exhibiting all these things about being a survivor of abuse, and she also fits this role so well because she is so timid looking, because she's got that mousy voice.
Yeah,
it really works, and it's quite amazing too. Because I think the same year this came out was the year Popeye came out.
yeah. I thought Popeye came out in 81.
I'm double checking that because I want to say it was 80 as well. It's like one of those things. It's like either one of us could be right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Popeye, the role she was born to play, 1980.
Okay, so yeah. I do have to say though, in that third act, her mousiness and nervousness was just like, I'm like, can you try to do anything, please? I just, even when she like knocked Jack out, it was just like an accident, and then she was dragging and she trying to unlock the pantry. I'm like, there's a pin with a chain right there.
Yeah.
Stop jerking on the handle. Pull the fucking pin out.
Part of that also, I'm gonna give her the benefit of the doubt that Wendy is probably terrified. She is not in her right mind. And that's a thing. I'm amazed that Danny was clear-headed enough in the maze to realize that his dad was following his footprints and then to step backwards into them to hide.
And I also have to say, after about the 500th time of him croaking red rum, I was starting to root for Jack. Like, please just slaughter this kid. I'm done with red rum, red rum.
You know what the funny thing is with that? I always thought that came up a lot earlier in this movie than it actually did. That's all third act stuff.
Yeah, I think it comes up like one time before that. And
maybe. I mean, the entity of Tony is throughout.
Yeah, and again, that's just an imaginary friend. That's like a defense mechanism of him.
Yeah,
absolutely nothing to do with The Shining, which is a big part of the book in the miniseries.
Right, exactly. The only time he ever really does anything like that is to talk to Halloran.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the things I love about the miniseries, which I have on DVD because I love it so much.
Okay.
Is sorry. Yeah. Stop opening the door, kitty. Is that you actually do see like an image of Tony, like that Danny converses with.
Yeah.
And then there's like a final scene of the movie that shows Danny graduating from college. Graduating from high school, college, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the older Danny is actually being played by the same actor that played Tony.
Oh.
I thought that was a really cool connection there.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that they continued Danny's story in Stephen King's Dr. Sleep, which was also turned into a movie.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen.
No, nor have I.
Yeah. I see a ton of gifs of Rebecca Ferguson in Dr. Sleep on Twitter, but that's about all I see. So one thing really stood out to me about this movie that I actually enjoyed was the score. I thought Wendy Carlos did a phenomenal job with this because it is so minimalist. Because if you're familiar with Wendy Carlos's work, she's
other than this one, I might have, but I don't know the name offhand.
So Wendy Carlos did the score. She adapted the Beethoven music for Clockwork Orange, which I know you haven't seen. She did the music for the original Tron.
Oh, that I like a lot. I love that score.
And what she was doing was she was utilizing she had Moog synthesizers. She was like one of the first composers to really understand the benefit of utilizing synthesizers. She also is actually the first prominent trans composer as well.
Oh,
in the 70s. So
that's almost progress.
Yeah, she is fantastic. Her work is really, really good. I would even recommend, even if you haven't seen A Clockwork Orange, check out the Beethoven adaptations that she does in it, because it is really, really good.
She does a very good job of kind of conveying the growing tension.
Yes,
which is good because there's just so many shots of just Jack just
being Jack Nicholson. That's always been an issue of mine.
The whole scene where they're walking around the the maze, and then he's just looking at the model and seeing them walking. I'm like, why does this scene have to be
here? There's a lot of that. So I'm pulling up some of Wendy Carlos's work here, so you're aware. So, yeah, The Shining, Arena, Tron, those are original scores. It was funny too, because when I was listening during the opening credit sequence, I'm like, is that Wendy Carlos? So, all right, music department.
That's because you're a lot better with identifying musical scores than I am.
Yeah. Okay. So Clockwork Orange, but as Walter Carlos.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she hasn't done a lot. England, My England. All right. Arranger, Queen Mary's Funeral March from 1995. Yeah. So very interesting. Musician for Nova. Yeah, so she's done a lot of interesting stuff, and
she's still around.
Huh?
She is still around.
She's still around. Yep.
Cool.
She just doesn't do as much as I see. Like she might be credited for Tron 3.0 or whatever the hell they're going to call it, but
Tron Ares, I think.
Full judgment till I see it.
I like Legacy. All right.
I understand you did. Yeah. Anyway, back to The Shining. Overall, this is a weird one to. It definitely falls within the genre of horror.
Yes,
I will give it that.
This is a psychological horror, whereas Stephen King wrote a supernatural horror.
Yes. Even though there are supernatural elements in this, I feel like this is mainly. You could take out all the supernatural elements and just say this guy got cabin fever and went about trying to kill his wife and child.
Yeah, honestly, I think this movie should have been called like The Overlook.
Yeah,
it does not need to be called The Shining because it has absolutely nothing to do with The Shining.
True. True. The only reason it's called The Shining is because it's adapted from the Stephen King book.
Yeah,
adapted.
In the same way that Lawnmower Man was adapted.
Oh my god. Or Maximum Overdrive, which he also directed.
Yeah. He's just sticking around.
The 80s and 90s were not kind to Stephen King adaptations. If your name isn't Misery.
Yeah, and they also weren't kind to his wallet because he spent a lot of that money on cocaine.
Yes, exactly, which is what brought us Maximum Overdrive. You've got a bad enough problem when you watch the movie you direct and go, I don't remember any of this. I have a problem.
Maybe I should lay off the nose candy.
Yeah, and he to his credit, cleaned up.
Yep.
Seems like an affable enough guy. He's allowed to have opinions about his own work because if I were him, I totally would.
Yeah.
This is a tough one because I feel like this is a must-watch once. I think that's kind of like my final summation of this movie. Is that this is a must-watch once, and you can make your own opinion about it.
Yeah, if you like it, fantastic. Yeah, I know there's an audience for this one. I know there's an audience for it, including Kurt right there.
Yep.
This is not my movie. I'm not the biggest horror fan as is. Most of you know that. This movie just does not do it for me in any form.
Yeah. I don't feel moved. I don't feel terrified. There is, I just went into my letterbox just because I was hold off on my letterbox reviews until after we do these. I threw it 3 stars. I think the cinematography, the music, and Shelley Duvall are good enough for a 3-star. Or for a 3 out of 5.
For me, this is a 1.5, 2 stars at most.
Okay. I'm always gonna fence it. With my ratings, I usually fence it. I really have to hate something to give it to anything below 2 stars.
Yeah, this one, I don't think I would ever go back and watch this movie.
And you did it once.
Yeah.
Your time, now your watch is ended. It's, that's all I think really you need for this.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. I don't feel the need to revisit this movie again unless somebody's like, "Hey, you want to watch The Shining?" I might be like, "Sure."
Yeah, it's all I would need to hear is Danny going red rum one more time. Jeff's just like, I'm turning off.
I feel like next year when we do the horror movies in the 90s, I feel like we need to put a good Stephen King horror movie in there.
All right, that's something.
It might have to be Misery, actually.
Guess what? I've never seen.
Oh, saw it on opening night.
There's several Stephen King movies I've never seen.
Yeah,
because horror.
Yep. Or we could do the TV adaptation of It.
Oh yeah.
Also 1990. Well, we've got a year to think about that. So,
I mean, Tim Curry is Tim Curry.
Tim Curry is Tim Curry in that movie.
Yeah,
he's certainly a Tim Curry.
And whereas Jack Nicholson in this one is he's a psychotic, Tim Curry as Pennywise is just so.
There's a lot of different layers on there that we can discuss next year.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to 1980. We want to know, what are your thoughts on The Shining? I know neither of us were really all that kind to certain aspects of this, but we want to know what your thoughts are. Leave a polite comment below. If it's your first time on the channel, hi. We do this every week, so check out our playlists of all our past reviews. Give this video a big thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button because we do this every week. And also, you can rate us on iTunes because it's the only place that really matters. 5 stars. You can complain about us in the comments. You can follow us on the socials. We are on Facebook at Geek Salad Podcast and on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads at Geek Salad Radio. We also host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts. So you can check that out. Our audio for that podcast also shows up here on YouTube as well. So you can check that out. And so far, hopefully, we're done with demonetization. We don't get monetized anyway, so I don't even know what the point is. We can check those out there as well. And I think I got everything. So until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth and be nerdful. See you next week when we talk about another horror movie.